Hey, I'm Scott from AquaQuest, and today I'm going to show you how to pitch a classic configuration, the Holden Tent. Hey, I'm Scott from AquaQuest, and today I'm going to show you how to pitch this particular configuration, which is known as the Holden Tent. We're going to be using the AquaQuest Defender 10x10 tarp, and this particular colorway is our Boulder Camo, which we came up with in-house. I really like it. It blends in well in rocky, mossy environments. If you have it overhead on a bright day, you get a nice dappling in the interior. Anyway, if you're interested in looking at that, check it out on our website. Again, Boulder Camo. So again, a 10x10 tarp, making this particular profile here. You can see it really has a classic tent-like profile, right? If you asked a kid to draw a picture of a tent, they'd probably come up with something like this. And it's actually a very usable design and goes up super quick with minimal equipment. And again, I find it extremely useful because it is very versatile. For example, we're going to be using a center pole here today. It's affixed to the center front. So that pole that we're using does not interfere with the living space within. Yes, you have to be careful as you enter and exit, but it does not eat up any usable space on the inside. That's a huge bonus. The other aspect is, you don't necessarily have to use a pole with this configuration. You could conceivably use an overhead hang attached to the front tie-out if you had that opportunity above you and it was safe to do so. So this could be suspended directly overhead by cordage, or if that situation wasn't available to you, you could potentially run a ridge line across the front and back of the shelter, so it was parallel with the front and back, and affix this to that ridge line. So there's multiple ways you can get this up. And ironically, I've used a pole today when I have a wealth of giant trees around. That said, I'm here in some old growth forest, and it is very difficult, even in the winter, which helps press down some of the baubles and bushes that are growing in this area. Even in that case, there's not a lot of usable ground to serve as a footprint for a shelter such as this. So despite all of the trees, I did not have the opportunity to pitch this using them for a support, simply because I would have to eat through acres and acres of cordage just to get this thing up. So it is actually easier and more efficient for me, despite all the trees around, to use my trusty tarp pole or trekking pole or branch to serve as the vertical support here, and it's just simply guide out in the front for stability. So this is, again, an easy pitch, minimal equipment. What we're using today is one 10x10 tarp, one vertical support, aka a tarp pole. We're using 5 stakes, one for each of the corners and one for a guy out, and 1 6-foot length of cordage to serve as our guy line. All right, so here we are in our starting position for this Holden Tent pitch. It's a square-based pitch. Facing the back wall here is right in front of my feet. So the first step we're going to do is to make a tight line between our 2 back corners. So I'm very simply going to knock a couple of stakes in. Now you might notice I'm using pretty conspicuous stake here. You can see it's quite large. So this is a snow or sand stake. So it's got a much wider build than most stakes. It's also got a curvature to it. And all this does is helps create more friction in sort of loose, crumbly snow or sand or sort of crystallized soil when we're in these conditions that are around freezing and a little bit messy. So you don't necessarily have to use these. They are a good thing to have in your toolkit. You won't be using them all the time, but they do come in handy. And in really tough conditions in deep snow, there are a couple of techniques using some cordage and a dead man that can really help secure it. I don't need that today. I've only got a little bit of snow and then I can get into the ground here. So I'm just going to use these stakes as is. So these are MSR Blizzard sand snow stakes if you want to check them out. They're not particularly cheap, but I only stock my kit with 4 of them. And for me, that moderate investment that will probably last a lifetime, unless I lose them, is going to be worth it. So draw this relatively taut, like I said. Doesn't have to try to set any records. I'm not a big fan of people overstraining their tarps. There's just really no need to have a drum tight line in most circumstances. We do want the lines to be clean, smooth, and taut. But remember, although these tarps are extremely durable, especially this Defender, I don't know of a more durable nylon-based tarp out there. They're still fabric. They're technical pieces of fabric. They're reinforced. They have a lot of strengthening features to them. But in order to have them last a lifetime, we don't necessarily want to overstrain them unnecessarily. So that's just my thought on the matter. Others may have different opinions. So keep it clean, keep it tight, but let's not put so much strain on the tarp that we shorten its lifespan. So with the 2 back walls pegged out in the corners, we're going to move to the front and center here. We're going to be using my trusty tarp pole. Again, you can use a different vertical support for this purpose. A trekking pole if it will reach high enough, or a trekking pole with a pole jack is another option, or again, a branch. So I am going to grab the front here. Now, there's a nice burly tie out right in the front middle here. For my purposes, I'm actually going to use this little secondary loop. Now, AquaQuest tarps, their larger models, contain something we call a lantern loop, which is a little subsidiary loop, still highly durable, on the underside of the main tie out that allows you to hang objects from when you're out in the bush. Now, because of the design of my particular tarp pole, I find it extremely handy as the receptor for the tip of this pole. So I'm just going to use that. And again, I just find that very, very convenient. Now I'm going to give a little tug here. And because it's snowy, crystallized, a little bit crunchy back there, before I reef on this, I want to make sure those back stakes are holding as they should. They appear to be. The line still looks good. So I'm going to get this up in an approximately vertical position. And I'm going to use this Defender square tarp has a ridge line that's reinforced with webbing for extra strength. That also gives me a good cue as to how to line up my pole with the body of the tarp. So that's a handy guide there. So I'm going to take a look at that and make sure I am in line with the back wall. And I'm just going to grab little 6 to 7 foot, give or take, length of cordage here that's going to serve as my guy out to keep this pole in place. Now, I will, oh, I went down there a bit. That's okay. That's good. That's fine. That's a little bit of security is good. Now, you may find as you do this, this pole will tumble, which is annoying, but not the end of the world. Once that happens, don't worry about it. Just carry on with the next steps. So I think I can do this because this pole gave a little clunk and sunk into this frosty ground. I think it's going to stay up just fine once I guy it out. So I am going to do that. I've cleared a little bit of the ground here just to make sure I have a really secure anchor. And I'm going to pull that forward. Again, trying to create a nice taut line. I could try to get a little bit more into this ground here. I don't have a snow stake for this particular application here, so I got to get it as deep and secure as I can. It's an important part of the structure, and you can tension that. That's looking pretty good. So you can see naturally, just with 2 moves, we almost have a shelter here. But that's staying up nicely. And then we'll just move on to the front corner. So pick a side, any side, doesn't really matter. Snow stake once again. What we're doing is creating a taut line from the pole to the corner and the back corner to the front corner, okay? Nothing too complicated. Take a moment to line it up there. Now this, once you get this up, this pitch lends itself to adjustment very well. You can remove any one stake, except maybe the guy line, and it will stay in place just fine. As you can see, we don't have this front corner out, and yet we have stability at this point. So you get this up and you think your back corner could be pulled out a little tauter. It's not gonna wreck all the work you've invested by going and fixing that. So I may indeed need to do that at the end of this process. So this is the last required stake for this pitch. And again, trying to get it taut from the pole to the corner, back corner to front corner, okay? And again, it's nice and tight, but it's not crazy tight. It's going to do its job. Rain, slush, snow is going to run right off it. There's not much chance of anything catching weight or sagging. That's my main concern. There we go. Now, check it all out for stability. As you can see, it's pretty solid. First try out. Back looks good. Sides look good. Again, they're not going to be flush with this kind of ground, which is very varying, as it were. So it's not a perfect mergence with the ground. However, with snow, you certainly could bank up snow on the exterior along the outside if you wanted that seal with the ground. Personally, I'm not sure it's going to be necessary for me here today. So looking at it, everything looks taut and square. Maybe a little saggy on this side. You may not be able to see it from this angle, but I'm not super stoked on the line of this one, so I think I'm just going to take a second. And again, if I pull this out, it's not going to be the end of the world. Nothing's going to collapse, knock on wood. Yeah, these conditions are a bit tricky, but they're still navigable. You just have to take your time and make sure you're prepared with equipment and clothing to get you through it. It's actually very pleasant out here today. A little bit wet when you get close to the ground, but that's how it goes. So there we are, Holden Tent. Good for holding out the rain. Now, we're done here, and I'll take a moment to show you the interior in just a sec. But again, just checking out my lines here. Now my pole is pretty secure. Maybe I could have got that a bit more up and down, but actually I like the way that's leaning. There's some good tension between those two forces there that are going to help keep things up. So yeah, there it is, the Holden Tent. I'm not sure about the pitch time with that. I guess it was like 3.5 to 4.5 minutes to get it up. It's an open face design, right? So I personally like that, especially for conditions like this, because I know, having pitched this, that I don't expect really inclement weather. If it does come, I know which direction it's coming from. I've pitched my entrance opposite the oncoming wind. So your back end should be into the wind. The wind will cruise right over this, won't cause it any problems. So the openness does a lot of things, especially in colder weather. It allows for air circulation. So if you're in there or two people are in there and just ambient body heat is going to rise off of you, hit the cool skin of the tarp, and condense, unless it has other places to go. This, the actual variation of the ground causing some gaps, as well as the open face, helps take a lot of moisture out of there and eliminate the dangers of condensation, okay? In a lot of circumstances, condensation is an inconvenience, but if you're in particularly cold conditions, it can be a little bit more serious than that. So just keep that in mind when you're camping out in the snow using a tarp. A fully enclosed system in these kind of conditions, I think that overnight you might have some livability issues with condensation coming in. So again, open face is nice. The other thing I like about this open face is you can, if you position it correctly and have particular attention to safety, okay? You can have a fire in conjunction with this tarp, offset to the side of the guy line, a small fire, and that heat is going to be somewhat captured and held within that tarp. So a fully enclosed setup is not going to get you that, okay? But on a night where I know that, sure, it might be cool, it might be nice to be sealed up, but I'm actually going to be more comfortable if I have a modest fire just off the edge, lots of clearance from the nylon, clearance from the guy line. Again, safety first, but I will be able to capture some of that heat. It's going to rise into the peak and move around that tarp a bit, okay? So I think that's a huge, huge benefit. And you could even build up a bank behind the fire to make sure that heat mostly travels towards your tarp and doesn't escape in other directions. So a couple of things you can do with that. While we're still on the exterior of the Holden tent here, I thought I'd bring up a couple of things about modifications and variations. So I've moved us over to a sort of side-on view. You can see it's quite sloped in the back, so you do lose headroom relatively quickly in this particular pitch. So that's something to consider. That said, if you have a tarp similar to the AquaQuest Defender here that has crossbody tie-outs, you do have the opportunity to create more usable space by applying one of those tie-outs to raise the lower half of this sloping wall. So as you can see, just for example, I've put a bit of cordage here. Now, if I had a tree to attach this to, unfortunately I don't without having a lot more cordage than I happen to bring with me today, I could run this in a way, and you can see we're adding another angle to this. We have just created a lot more headroom there, and we'll have usable space right to the back wall perimeter with a setup such as this. So what you could do if you don't have a tree is to run a pole to support this line and then to continue the line to guy it out. It's a really great modification. It creates a lot more comfortable space, especially if you're going to do two people with this. This is a recommended maneuver, I would say. The other things about modification, I mentioned that you are able to scrap the use of a vertical support pole if you can overhead hang it, either from a ridgeline type scenario or a direct overhead hang. So again, there's some flexibility with that component of this as well. The other thing you can do is the height of the entryway, so the apex on this front face here, is somewhat adjustable. You can make that taller, understanding that that's going to narrow the front floor space as the height pulls in the width, or you could lower it a bit, reducing your headroom up at the front, but opening these front wings out slightly for increased floor space that way. So here we are inside the Holden tent. You can see it's pretty comfortable here. I've got a waterproof ground sheet down to keep the snow off me. And instead of an air mattress, I'm using a foamy with some reflective on it to help keep heat where I want it. So this is perfectly adequate for one person and a pet, one person and a pet and gear. I would think that two people would have no trouble with this at all. You would really maybe enjoy it more if we, as we discussed, raised it from one of those tie loops that are on the ridge of this particular tarp. That would really move things up here. You can see how much more space you would have that's usable. So I think after I sign off from this video, I am going to figure out how I'm going to make that modification work, because I think it's worth it. But you've seen the basics of the Holden tent. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching it go up. I think it took us maybe 4.5 minutes all told to get it running, and practice it a couple times. You'll be able to do it quicker than that. So again, Holden tent. Easy to set up. We're using a 10x10 Defender tarp from AquaQuest. It's our heaviest duty tarp. The colorway is boulder camo. You'll only find that at AquaQuest. We use one vertical support pole for our structure here. It's guyed out by one length of cordage that's approximately 6.5 feet long. And in addition to that, we are simply using 5 stakes. So 4 corners and the guy out. Again, you saw me use snow stakes. May need them, may not. Depends on your situation. If you're going to be trying it out in snow, I recommend you try them. Again, they're not the cheapest thing in the world, but they'll add up to a lifetime of use for you. So if you're looking at doing some winter camping or sort of camping on sand, excellent for you to pick up. So thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel. We're going to be doing more videos throughout the winter season and beyond. So we appreciate your feedback and look forward to seeing you out there. Thanks.